Welcome everybody to another awesome webinar with the CSA. This is a different flavor today. It's an open conversation between myself and Nikita from PartnerStack. And I think the way that we've structured this is almost like a Q&A, but led by you being a host, Nikita. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. It's honestly, we're not going to share any slides here. We're really just going to have a conversation about, partnerships, what partnerships looks like today, what, different teams look like, and, just the general ecosystem. I kind of wanted to start off by having you introduce yourself, a little bit of your background, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So my name's Ty Lingley, based in Vancouver, BC. Personally, a proud father of a wonderful daughter who's 2.5. Spend a lot of time outdoors here in Vancouver, between here and Whistler. Recently got involved in a project in Squamish, which is a place in between Whistler and Vancouver. So I'm spending a lot of time there in the farming realm, vertical farming. So I'm getting into that with a couple of partners, and that's pretty exciting. So between family, my outdoor pursuits, mountain biking, snowboarding, and this new kind of vertical farming venture, that's kind of what keeps me busy.
Awesome. I love that. And then for those of you that don't know, Ty is also the director of partnerships or head of partnerships at ally.io, which got acquired by Microsoft recently, which I think he'll kind of dive into. And then I'm Nikita. I'm the head of channel partnerships and alliances here at PartnerStack. We're a tool and a solution that helps a lot of organizations actually set up their partner programs. But Ty, now that we've got that out of the way, now this is where I do want to ask that question. So
now that I forgot to talk about where I work.
Yeah, I mean that's the good part. But yeah, okay. How did you get started in partnerships? What kind of brought you into the space? And let's just start there.
Yeah, so I got involved in quote unquote partnerships 12 years ago, and I would call them back then, there were more sponsorships. So I worked for the Olympic Games for many years, and I was on partnerships, but it was called sponsorships back then, essentially where a sum of money was paid, and that would equate to a bunch of rights and benefits. And that was about 12 years ago. That industry has actually evolved to become more partnership focused, and all the people I used to work with that had sponsorship in the titles, it's now been changed to partnership. So nothing sponsorship anymore, it's all partnership. And you see these partnerships to be more strategic today, whereby they're performance based, where a sports team will share in revenue with a partner or back and forth. And so that was my kind of world of negotiating corporate sponsorships and then executing on those rights and benefits. And then I transitioned into the world of e-com with one of Canada's fastest growing e-com companies. That was quite some time ago. And then from there, I got into SaaS.
Awesome. I love that. And so what was the biggest differentiator, I guess, between sponsorships and SaaS? Was that a pretty big jump?
Or I mean,
how did that feel?
Technology, for one. I mean, nothing back then was done with a PRM or an account mapping tool, or there was not really much attribution in place. So the core differentiator was it was a lot of relationship selling. Of course, there was revenue targets tracked in spreadsheets, but the fundamentals are the same. Like in partnerships, you're of course there's tech at play where you're partnering with a company, but primarily we partner with each other, right? Like it's still a relationship based business to be in at the end of the day, where you're trying to establish fit, rapport, thinking opportunistically and having a shared vision of what can be. That still remains the same, but the difference I would say is the leveling up in terms of being in the tech sector, and all of the attribution and reporting and scaling through tech that's enabled was a big jump. So big jump for me coming over into SaaS.
I love that. It's really cool.
And you?
Really cool. Yeah, it was kind of serendipitous. So I had started a PartnerStack serendipitously with our CEO Bryn reaching out to me on LinkedIn randomly. When they were 6 people. Basically didn't know Bryn, had no idea who he was, just added him on LinkedIn, and his first message to me was, hey, I'd love to jump on a call. And my answer to him at the time was, hey, would love to do that, but who are you and what do you want to talk about? Which was kind of interesting because I still remember it that way. But jumped on a call with him and one of our co-founders, Luke, and at the time joined the organization largely to lead go-to-market efforts, which at a 6-person organization, as many people can attest, is a lot of things. And at the time, it definitely wasn't partnerships. It was direct, it was a little bit of marketing, a little bit of branding, even a little bit of customer success. But as we've kind of scaled to about 200 people now, which is crazy to think about, it was kind of, we needed to start, and being a technology provider that focuses on partnerships, needed to start figuring out what that meant for us. And so it just felt like the natural next step after we got some of our basics under the direct team together, that we understand, okay, how do we now go to market through partnerships? How do we expand what we can do either through technology partnerships or selling reseller partnerships, or even just marketing partnerships in general? And so surprisingly jumped into that role at the height of the pandemic. I think I started April 2020. So as the pandemic was reaching its peak, I was like, you know what, screw direct. I'm just going to jump into partnerships, which was interesting.
It's so
but that's
meta.
how it happened.
It's so meta. You're in partnerships basically at like the partnership company.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, tell me a bit about like what type of partnerships, and briefly touch on like what challenges have you found sitting on your side of the table.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like with even though we're a partnerships organization, right? Like we're still an organization where things need to be proved out, right? And so I think the majority of 2020 was, myself alone trying to figure out, well, what kind of partners make sense for us to drive revenue? Because, I still, as an organization of 200 people, like revenue is core to, what we do, as it is for most organizations. And so I think we started off initially focusing on kind of sell-through partners or selling partners. And we saw a lot of success with that. So as well as like some of our larger strategic partnerships. So setting up strategic partnerships with Ingram Micro, for example, as a distributor, or other resellers, CRM resellers in the space that would be, selling CRMs that didn't have PRM platforms associated to it, was kind of a really interesting target for us. But 2020 was very much a, let's figure out what partnerships even means here. Like, are we going to look, what kind of partners are we going to target, period? Bring in an additional hire to the team. So it was 2 people in 2020, and I think we're at around 7 people today at the partnerships organization at PartnerStack. So largely focused on, selling and sell through partners. So your kind of value added resellers, your agencies, your co-sell partners, as well as some larger strategic initiative partners with others in our space. So that's kind of where we've been today. So we've grown pretty quickly over a year, I think. We've gotten some of the core infrastructure down, but it definitely was still a process for us to put some of that infrastructure in place and prove out, like, okay, we're a partnerships organization, but I think something we'll talk about today is there's a lot of routes to partnerships, and we needed to figure out what route was best for us, at least at the beginning.
Right. Sounds like you're figuring it out just like everyone else.
Yeah, basically. But I think what we've seen across partnerships and across PartnerStack as we've helped other vendors is, it seems like, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Ty, it seems like partnerships is entering this like really weird golden era, right? Where, in the 2000s, it felt like CRM was the rage, just getting, the core infrastructure around, direct selling and things like that. And in the 2010s, it felt like it was the marketing automation, and that was really becoming a science. But kind of wanted to ask you, how are you seeing partnerships on your side? Is partnerships entering a golden era? And just kind of wanted to go off that.
Yeah. So before I start this, like I have this quote in my mind from Justin Kahn. It was a tweet he made, and I keep thinking about it. It may be true or maybe not, but I think it lends well to what we're talking about. And he says, first-time founders are obsessed with product. Second-time founders are obsessed with distribution. And partnerships are all about distribution in many ways. Not all about, but that's a primary function of partnerships. But I think we're entering this golden era. And I see there's like 3 major tailwinds that are really promoting this. The first is acquisition is getting more expensive and tricky. So people are looking for new routes to market. And I think smart companies recognize that they can't replicate the reach and influence that partners have. So that's the first kind of tailwind, is this consciousness of what's happening. 2, partner tech is getting way more sophisticated, enabling people to scale programs and properly attribute them, and the impact that partnerships are having on the business. So I think with the rise of this tech, that's a pretty good indicator that we're kind of moving into this golden era. Who knows what part of the slope we're at, but I think it is kind of the beginning. And the last, what I'll say, and this is something that I think that Scott Brinker talks about all the time, is we're in this era of ecosystem where companies also are beginning to understand the value of partner influence, where we're not kind of splitting hairs on margin, because we understand the impact of things like close rate, deal size, and lifetime value. And those, you know, there's this golden measurement that keeps getting talked about, which is like, for every dollar we earn, how much do our partners earn? And we know there's a whole ton of enterprise value in this whole ecosystem. So there's less nitpicking, I think, that's happening right now in some ways with partnerships as to their value. And so once that's established and we now have people sitting in the C-suite, I really think we're entering a golden era.
Yeah, I mean, something that I think you and I have talked about before is at the beginning of this year, it felt like partnerships were entering the boardroom. And I think Jay McBain's talked about this too, but it felt like they were entering the boardroom, but board members didn't really know what that meant, right? But now, as kind of 2021 has kind of progressed, a lot of SaaS businesses have come online, and especially have gone into the public markets. You see, really successful partnerships of all different shapes and sizes, whether technology or reseller, et cetera. And the effect that they actually have on, the really like the bottom line for a lot of organizations. Like, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, Ty, but in the stock market this week, it hasn't been an easy week for a lot of organizations. But Affirm and their partnership with Amazon has absolutely exploded over the last 24 hours because they continue to expand that alliance. And so, a lot of board members are now looking at, these other public companies and what they're doing and how they're succeeding in what I would still say, like a very, very difficult and an environment where you're supposed to over exceed constantly, right? And they're leveraging those partnerships. So to that point, I know, Ty, you mentioned ecosystems. Like, what other signals, indicators are you seeing that are generally validating this?
Yeah. Simple ones, like look at Jay McBain's tech stack infographic, just like Scott Brinker's, it just keeps growing and expanding. So there's just clearly more players seeing opportunity and coming into the space. The amount of funding that's coming into the space, look at Crossbeam's raise. I know that you guys raised a bunch of money. I was a part of a group that had an oversubscribed seed raise for another partnership related piece of tech. So I think the amount of funding going in is a good signal. The number of outstanding job opportunities with the title partnerships in them, not even in SaaS, just across the board. Like, I'm seeing partnership roles in like nonprofit sectors, like a whole bunch of sectors where it's the established norm of terminology for a job. And then I think other signals, like I was on a really awesome webinar the other day that was speaking with Brent Nixon at Reputation, and he's now a chief ecosystem officer. So you talk about partnership professionals getting into the C-suite. That's a new title I'd never heard of, chief ecosystem officer. I think there's another guy named Kit Merker, and he's the COO at Noble 9, and he came from partnerships, chief business officer. So I think you're starting to see more partnership people enter the C-suite, and that's a strong signal, because that's a seat at the table that partnerships have that it previously didn't, right?
Completely. I mean, I think to your point about the jobs, just look at the Cloud Software Association and all the job listings and postings in there. Right? Like, I think it's a never-ending stream of any type of partner opportunity or partner role that you want to get into. You can, if you have an inclination towards sales or to marketing or towards technology partnerships. There is almost like a flavor that you can kind of dive into and really be involved in, if that's kind of if partnerships is kind of a goal that you want to go after. But kind of transitions me to another thought. So, and this is a little bit of a broad question, but it's intentionally broad. What does a modern partnerships team look like? So you've set up 2 partnerships teams. So one at Unbounce and one at Ally. What have you seen as like consistencies like across both? But additionally, what have you seen in the market? Like, what kind of partnership teams have been developed, and what have you seen?
Yeah, I've seen a lot developed, and I'll just give kind of 2 perspectives. One is tactically, something that I've seen in the market and starting to be replicated is something I think Eric Chan at ChargeBee came up with. Is this concept of a partner pod, where a team is tasked with the growth objectives of a certain partner cohort, and the team includes like a partner manager, someone in partner success, someone in partner marketing, someone in partner operations, and so it's kind of this squad, kind of like a traditional product squad that would have been put together, but for partnerships. I think that's a really cool concept. For me, and the way that I currently work at Ally, we have a small partnership team, but more importantly, we have partner representation. And to me, that's arguably more important because it's about influence across the org. And so each team that's critical to the partnerships team's success has partner representation with whom we share OKRs with, being OKR software, of course. So that's somebody in our demand gen team, that's somebody on our brand team, that's somebody with the BDR team, with the AE team, with our services team, and someone in product. So I share OKRs with all of these partner representatives that are embedded already in other functions within the company. And that's a way that I was able to kind of scale the impact and influence of partnerships pretty quickly. That was kind of my tactical approach, because I think you can, partnership leaders can get hung up on like my team and how big is my team going to be and how fast can I build it. But if you don't have the influence with all the people that those people are going to need to work with in the future, it doesn't make much sense. So if you want to stay small and mighty, I think it's better to have solid relationships with a key player in each functional area that's critical to your success and actually share an OKR with them. Once you prove that, validate that out, then of course you can hire your team and they're going to be in a much better position to succeed now that those kind of motions are established and those relationships are established.
Yeah, you're almost basically ensuring that partnerships has to become part of their success, right? Like if you're going and you have like representation in product and in customer success and marketing, and there are OKRs attached to this, like if those OKRs don't get hit, like it doesn't just impact you, it ultimately impacts the core marketing team, right? So it's this kind of like catch-22. If they don't help, then they're honestly hurting themselves just as much as it is hurting the partnerships team,
Totally.
which helps you not be a silo almost, correct?
Yeah. Well, and the drum I always bang is like, if I'm doing my job well, I'm helping you hit your goals in these various other functions. And I see Margot's on the call, and Margot's a beast partner marketer. I love everything that she puts out. What's up, Margot? But I've been in situations before where, if you're tasked with driving demand and, generating revenue, if you're not working with someone on the marketing team who has a lead gen goal based on partner marketing, like you're going to struggle every quarter to like pitch the marketing team on some co-marketing opportunities that you think are great. You're really going to struggle. But when someone shares that goal with you, it becomes a lot more powerful. And the cool thing about co-marketing, which I've learned firsthand at Ally, really is it really scales the BD function. It makes everyone's lives a lot easier when you've built up a beast co-marketing machine. It makes it easier to acquire partners, to get to market with them, to show them value, to get quick wins, all sorts of stuff.
Totally, couldn't agree more. And then I think part of this, like to answer a bit of the question too, is like I think it also depends on what kind of partnership, right? Like you're looking to run, and so it's like, well, are you focused on marketing partnerships? To your point with co-marketing, is your core metric lead generation with partners, right? Is it channel sales, right? I know a lot of organizations that we work with still run very traditional reseller, selling partner, kind of value added reseller programs, and then or is the core focus on technology partnerships, right? And what's the value of those technology partnerships? Is it the core connection, and then ultimately is there some revenue or success metric, or maybe an NRR increase metric that you can tie to those technology partnerships? But I think to your point, I think we've all been kind of really obsessed with our teams, but also the function of the team dictates the size of it and the scale, and ultimately where we need to push and press influence, right? So on tech partnerships, like tech partnerships couldn't see tech partnerships working without a very strong alliance with product and engineering, just because they're so involved in, setting those kind of pieces together. Marketing, partnerships are top of funnel. Like I said, like your core focus is going to be on marketing, but it's good to have, I think, influence across the organization at every team, and almost tying their success to your success, because that's, if there's an owner to that, then people tend to focus on that a little bit more.
Totally. I completely agree. I think like partnerships mean different things to different companies, and each type of partnership is so different. In my experiences, coming in as the first partnership hire, that's the fun. Like, to me, that's the really fun stage, where you're just trying to, validate and establish which partner motions you're going to make. And so you get to touch all different types of partnerships, which is really cool. And then, of course, as you mature, there's going to be, people who own different functions. And now it's really interesting, because transitioning to Microsoft, I'm going to go from kind of overseeing all of our go-to-market relationships through partnerships, and it TBD, but probably get into much more verticalization. I'll probably work really, really closely with solutions and service partners. Yeah, again, to your point, you're right. Like, it depends on what time you come into the company, what stage it's at, and where the focus and core strengths are existing, as to where you'll probably double click and really start to get in a different partnership type.
Ty, and I know we haven't really talked about this, but it made me think about a really good point. So, at Ally, you came in about a year ago, right? And I believe partnerships was still very new to Ally at the time, right?
Yeah, it didn't exist.
It didn't exist. Okay. Now that Ally is forming under Microsoft, which I think, as we all know, drives 90% of their 90 to 95% of all of their revenue through channel partnerships.
Yeah.
Do you see that shifting? Ally's focus is distribution going to become a larger part of that? You don't have to have an answer, but I'm just almost curious.
Of course, because we are Microsoft. We are going to be absorbed into Microsoft, and Ally will become Microsoft. It'll be part of the Viva suite, which is all about the employee experience, targeting kind of the HR space in this new way we're all getting accustomed to working to. So it'll change. It will change 110%, because it's going to be the same motions that you think of with any product that Microsoft goes to market with. There's a partner channel, but it's going to be the same. I was working with my counterpart yesterday and looking at what's planned in the next 12 months, and it's great, because I don't think anyone does product marketing better than Microsoft. It's pretty amazing to see, but the basics are going to be the same. This Viva suite is really kind of a startup within Microsoft, and we need to get, we need to recruit, enable, co-sell, all the same motions that I just went through the past year at Ally. We're going to be doing again in this Viva suite, but just, of course, with like massive players. Like, I'm already speaking with the Accentures, Slaloms, Bain, Deloitte's of the world, and GSIs. So it's going to be a complete shift into what we're doing, but the process and the playbook that everyone here is learning about, doesn't matter what size company you're at, it's applicable it's applicable in the next level size of company. Of course, there's going to be some nuance, but the fundamentals are really the same, with, of course, a whole host of enterprise learnings that I'm going to have to go through.
I'm almost thinking, because Microsoft is such a big channel, it's huge, right? And maybe some of those sellers today are focused on, selling CRM or ERP. To your point prior, having key influencers on those teams. Also think about, how do we bundle our sellers? How do we get our sellers selling ERP alongside this Viva suite? And things like that is going to become just as important as you guys kind of expand to the organization. But to your point, basically, a lot influence across organization is going to be valuable.
Yeah, really, it's going to be like a totally different ballgame too, because we're projecting this to be a $10 billion business, and like we already have the largest GSIs in the world chomping at the bit to basically sell what's being developed right now. So it's different when there's like a massive tailwind push and there's people like waiting for your product. It's just a matter of like, how are we going to enable them adequately to not only deliver and, of course, make money, but really understand what we're trying to achieve with this employee experience, so that the end customer is really, really getting the benefit of the tech coupled with, of course, the support of the people who are going to help implement it. And we need to spend a lot of time getting that right.
I love that. Okay, cool. It's really, really, really good to hear. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I just, the Microsoft thing didn't even hit me till now. But now, thinking of all the opportunities that are there, and it just shifts the conversation so dramatically, right?
Yeah, totally.
Um, I guess on that note, what role does technology play in all this?
I mean, the first thing, like, let's be clear, technology alone is not the solution. So more important to anyone's success here, I think, is the foundation of the business itself and how you're set up as a partnership professional to succeed. But I don't think you can get to scale without some technology in place. And a sales team wouldn't run without a CRM. So as an example, it's like, why is it okay to have a homegrown PRM if you're expecting scale? So I think technology definitely plays a critical role to go beyond early days, and kind of, in the early days, you do things that don't scale, and then in the future you can't do things that don't scale. But so to cross that chasm, of course, technology is a piece of that, and you want to lay the foundation.
Yeah, you say that. I think any sales ops team or any solutions engineering team, shudder when they hear the word homegrown CRM. And it's funny because we haven't seen that yet in partnerships, but it's getting there. It's like, hey, no one wants to build a CRM anymore. With Salesforce, Oracle, HubSpot, Dynamics, all out there, you have so many options. The dev team really needs to justify, like, why are we building this? But for some reason, partnerships is in this like weird space where it's actually okay. It's like, yeah, you know what, we're gonna build a PRM. It's like, well, is this your core business? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Why
Well,
are
and
we
that's
doing
because it's such early days, right? Like,
it? Yeah.
why should we invest in something when we're not quite sure of what it means? So I think it makes sense up until a certain point. But at some point, you're gonna have to validate and commit, and then invest in the tooling that's gonna help you get to where the opportunity really is, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I actually just came out of a meeting this morning where I think the topic of conversation was I think there's been more in, like, partnerships has been a very slow moving, slow growth industry for 20 years, right? Because it's been around since, yeah, we've gone into cloud, and even prior to that when we were on prem. But it feels like in the last 9 months, there's been more investment in the partnerships technology space and just the partnership space than there has in the past 20 years combined. So it feels like that innovation, especially on the technology side, is coming faster. And we're seeing that at PartnerStack, where there's thousands of people searching for PartnerStack daily, and different PRM solutions, and we're kind of coming in to fill a pretty big void that's being left by the market. But I couldn't agree more. Like the CRM piece, it's crazy that we still think about partnerships that way, but it's cool to see the conversation shifting.
Agreed.
And so you've run, and going back to this, you've run two programs today, one at Unbounce, one at Ally. What's the kind of technology that you've used today? What's been the technology that you've used? How is it differed from organization to organization? I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. The tech has definitely changed in my latest role. It was my first experience really getting into the art of account mapping. And so, there's tools out there, Partnered, Crossbeam, ShareWork. They're all great. And I think they enable you to at least have that baseline look at fit, which is really great. And the cool thing is our team internally has also adopted account mapping as kind of the focal point before we start a deep dive on integrations we're going to build, before we, when we look at our prospecting, we kind of go partner first to kind of look at like where there's overlap. And so I think account mapping as a technology itself has just enabled us to have better conversations internally and make more data informed decisions. So that's kind of a key piece of the stack. There's other little tools on the side that can be used. One that I just discovered today is called Respona. That's a really cool tool to help recruit partners. So, because I think a lot of people launch programs, and of course the challenge is to get the right people in. And so recruiting is always an effort. Respond is a cool tool that I checked out. Classic like LinkedIn Navigator, I use a lot in terms of, especially in my early days with solutions and service partners. Gong. Gong is used widely here. We kind of set up notifications when certain partners are mentioned, just to kind of give us a pulse on the ground of what's happening. Salesforce, of course. Slack, I use Slack in a way that's pretty cool. I've set it up with most of our strategic and core partners, whereby yeah, we've opened up the floodgates to introduce them to all the right people internally here, and also going the other way. And so there's a lot of chatter all the time in the deals we're into with our partners in Slack. So I think I spend the most amount of time with our partners in Slack. And then, of course, to automate the program at scale and facilitate it, we use PartnerStack.
I love that. Sorry, I'm actually going to take a second on that, because I think we have a question here, Ty, and then I kind of want to get back to the technology piece. But while we have it, Ty, what's your advice on someone building a partner program from scratch with a team of 1 to 2? I guess one, I want you to tackle that from a just general strategic perspective, but then on the technology side, what should someone building a partner program from a team of 1 to 2 focus on?
Right. So a bit of a loaded question, because it could be like, what's your advice for someone whose CEO and exec team believes in partnerships and has really crafted a JD that fits their need, and you've been hired to come in with a team of 1 to 2 to build that out, versus, oh, we think this partnership thing could be good. We know that, you're in sales. Why don't you try a kick at it? And you and some other person in marketing might have a go at it. I think that's different. But once you're in the seat, well, and away you go. Like, I think the fundamentals are there. I think, first up, it's like setting yourself up for success. So I think, as I mentioned before, there's going to be core teams depending what type of partnership function you're looking in, whether it's tech partners, affiliate partners, referral partners, consulting partners, whatever. There's going to be key people within the organization that you really need to succeed. So I think my advice is to get buy-in early and often from all of those people. And that buy-in, and this is a course that I just recently taught, was really starts with having a good strategy. So I think a lot of partnership people get in the seat and they start working right away, which is really, really important. But the other piece is you need to create the space for yourself to create a proper strategy, right? Because that's what you're going to be internally repeating and telling to other stakeholders. You're going to be internally selling the same pitch, and buy-in and success starts there when people at least trust you have a point of view and a path forward. So I think a strategy is really, really important. And then, of course, a strategy is an input to your objectives and key results, which I would recommend from the get-go setting annually. So your strategy's in place. Everyone's like, okay, like this makes sense to me. You've outlined the reasons why, what role we play, how we're going to approach it. And then, of course, you can set your objectives and key results, which then state, hey, here's what we intend on doing, why we intend on doing it, and here's how we're going to measure the success of what we're laying out this year. So I think the strategy, then the OKRs, and then once that's in place, I'd say you have more fertile ground to start moving. And so I won't get too deep tactically into that unless people want to, but I think, my reco to start is to create that fertile ground that you need to succeed. Usually happens with a good strategy and a good set of OKRs that are kind of project the future for you.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I've talked to a whole bunch of partnership leaders now, and I think as they go into that role, something that they all talk about is, obviously you want to, and most organizations want you to start doing the work right away, but having a strategy, or even having a document, like a living, breathing document, where that strategy changes over time as you're going from that 1 to 2 people into more, helps at least communicate the vision to ELT leadership up to the board, and then ultimately across the organization, so that they can understand like what partnerships actually means at the organization, and what's the path forward, and how is it going to be measured. Because if you don't get those core things right at the early stages, it becomes almost like you start running, but you don't necessarily know what you're running to, or
Yeah.
other teams don't know. And then suddenly, have conflicting priorities, or someone's trying to say that their priority is more important than yours, but they don't understand the broader context of some of those
Mhm.
partnerships, or, what that strategic vision actually is for the organization. Or even, you mentioned partner recruiting there, Ty. Like, I think for a lot of people that start in that 1 or 2 person role, especially in an organization where partnerships isn't a thing yet, you don't necessarily know what partners are going to pick it up. And so that early stage is very fluid, but
Yeah,
helping, a lot of at least the senior leadership team understand, like, hey, this is who we're going to try to tackle. This may work, this may not work,
yeah.
and this is how we're going to measure success, or even just the experiment.
For sure. And just the exercise of going through thinking about a strategy, when you're thinking about a SWOT analysis, when you're thinking about your ideal partner profile, the value prop to yourself, the company, and the customer, when you start running through that and creating it, you're just better equipped to have conversations in the future. And really what you're doing, it's almost like starting a company in general. You're kind of creating, you're almost like a product marketer, and then you're creating a value prop for partnerships and yourself internally, and it becomes your brand, and it becomes something that you repeat over and over again until it's baked into the DNA of the company, until you're a partner centric company. And it starts with that. So it's kind of like, think of yourself as a brand trying to get off the ground. How do you go about doing that? And this is a way to, I think, start doing it.
Totally. Ty, I actually, so on this note,
Yeah.
I know you said you wouldn't get tactical, but I want to spend like
Yeah.
a 2 minutes here.
Yeah.
Basically everyone wants us to get tactical. So
Yeah.
like, get tactical. And then I guess the additional question here is, how do you argue for more resources? How do you frame it with your CEO? I mean, let me just tackle that really quickly on my side. The best, I think, to Ty's note around the strategy document, once you have clear targets and clear things that you're moving towards, once, like, having that strategy document and comparing it, whether the focus is revenue, or faster time to close, or higher NRR, once you have that and you're starting to see traction within the partnerships organization, once you are hitting and maybe even exceeding those organizations in a just a short time frame, you basically go back to, in my case, I go back to our C-suite and say, hey, we have hit these metrics, we've exceeded them, we are moving really fast past them. Like, we need more headcount, and we need more individuals on the team to continue to accelerate growth. And I think part of our organization is, growth is the lifeblood of our organization. And so anything that accelerates that, the conversation gets, escalated pretty quickly. But, would love to hear from you, Ty, as well.
Yeah, it's like the lamest analogy that everyone uses, but it's the best way to put it. It's like, when you're dating, you don't pop the question on like date 2, 3, or 4. Like, you got to develop a lot of trust. So I think there's this unspoken bit in partnerships where you, as an individual, as a partnership leader, need to establish yourself as a trusted advisor. And that's a whole series of things. And of course, there's the strategy, which I talked about. So in terms of specifically in getting resources, by the time you ask, you should have earned that trust. And part of that trust is, qualitative and quantitative. And I think, when we talk about something like a strategy, if you've done it right, like, there's a budget in there. There's a budget in there. There's a loose forecast as to what you expect is going to happen. And, there's a part of it that's also like framing the conversation to think opportunistically, especially if it's early days and there's nothing established yet. Like, partnerships are opportunistic at that point, probably with some signals that they can potentially succeed. But in that strat doc, you really got to outline what you think the impact can be, quantify it, kind of put together a little bit of a business case. And then of course a budget should be in there. So asking for resources is an input to the outcome. But before you do that, I think you need to have your ducks in a row. And so I'm happy to share the elements that I put in a strategy. I have a document that I can share with people. I think if you've done that job, if you've done a good job with that, and there's some level of buy-in on partnerships as an opportunistic play, I think that you should be well equipped to having a resourcing conversation.
Couldn't agree more. Like I said, I think it comes back to that strategy and growth. And to your point, opportunistically. If you're looking at partnerships and your organization is structured around growth, as probably most of ours are, how do you present partnerships as the opportunistic way to hit some of that growth and show some strong, basically some strong metrics around why that could be the case.
Yeah. Some other, like, so let's tactically, someone shouted out, let's get tactical. There's a few other things that I've been learning a lot lately. And like, depending on your partnership type, there's a lot you can learn from a good growth marketer. And you probably know this, Nikita. And I think about, more SMB focused SaaS companies that are really tinkering around with this affiliate and referral channel. And I think people often discount it because it's kind of usually associated with pretty spammy things and products in the B2C world. But like, the more I'm clicking into this, like, man, there's early stage SaaS companies with the SMB focused audience that are just crushing it in affiliate. And we all know Patty, he has a lot of tips and tricks on partner acquisition and activation. And so tactically, I won't spill all the beans. I won't spill any beans, actually, but I think a growth marketer can be your best friend, because really affiliate becomes a channel, or referral partners are a channel. And so how do you maximize that channel? So I think by partnership type, there's a lot of growth marketing related ways, quote unquote, like hacky ways to really get going and gain traction.
Yeah. To your point, Ty, and so, PartnerStack deals with a whole bunch of different channels. So affiliate, referral, reseller, technology partner. But we initially started our kind of journey in affiliate and referral. And I was actually just at Affiliate Summit West last week out in Vegas. And I think B2B, especially for us, it's growing so rapidly in that space. And I think we've all come from, like, affiliate was largely built in consumer, and that's why we associate it with kind of spammy things. But I truly believe some of the next billion-dollar companies will come through, finding, affiliate for B2B. There is a huge market for it that's completely undertapped and underserviced.
Yeah.
I mean, a really small signal of that, and they're not really focused on B2B exclusively, but there's NerdWallet. NerdWallet just IPO'd at well over $1 billion, and
Crazy.
their entire model is, effectively a B2B affiliate for the finance industry.
Yeah.
And so huge player in that space if you're kind of in the finance piece, but tons of opportunity like that, strategic partnerships, affiliate referral, and the kind of that.
For everybody, right? Like,
Yeah.
and Jay talks about this all the time, like the way like B2B buying is more closely going to mirror the B2C journey. And I was listening to a podcast with Brian Halligan, like CEO of HubSpot, and he completely believes this, that there's all these areas of influence in any journey, whether it's enterprise software or SMB focused software, where there's all this opportunity to have influence. And so Jay talks about partnerships, people's role really being about community and thinking about and nurturing all the places of influence from start to end, not just influence transacting on the deal, but like influence beforehand and influence on, upsell and expansion and renewal. And so I think, we keep talking about like the affiliate, but these are just people of influence. Replace affiliate with just people of influence. That could be content creators, thought leaders, anything. And so I think, if we keep in mind this trend that, B2B buyers are going to more mirror B2C buyers, you start to think about partnerships differently and expand upon it.
Completely. And I think, given this, I think it's probably, I know we only have 4 or 5 minutes here. A good kind of way to kind of segue out into the end of this, Ty, is, how do SaaS companies capitalize on some of these trends right now? Like, how are you seeing that? Like, what's the next step for anybody listening here? Like, how do they leverage this?
Oh man, that is a big question. I mean, it comes back again, I think, to the priorities of the company where you're seeing signal, because there's going to be different partnership functions that make more sense than others, right? Like, I think ecosystem's a huge play right now. At some point, and I mentioned HubSpot, at some point in HubSpot's journey, like the prioritization of the ecosystem mattered most. In the beginning, when Pete was there, they're figuring out and hacking a way to like build out this agency channel. And it was a great way to get to market and basically train people on how to make money wrapping around HubSpot. That was a great for a moment in time then, 40% of revenue there from that channel. And then there's this era where now, Scott gets hired and we're in the era of ecosystem for them. And so look at what's being built. Look at it's kind of reflecting like the App Store app, I think of Apple in the App Store for HubSpot. And so I think when you talk about capitalizing on trends, I think it depends on the business you're in, the stage you're at, where you're seeing signal from, and what makes most sense at that stage for the company. You can spray and pray and go full tilt on partnerships and try and like exhaust all, types and see where you land. But I think you probably want to think deeply about where you're going to make investments early on, especially if partnerships aren't an established function. That was a
I think
vague
part of it
answer.
too.
I know.
Yeah, I think part of it too is like there seems to be a playbook developing around partnerships too, right? And
Yeah.
so I think if you look at organizations like the Cloud Software Associations, it doesn't feel like you're just stepping into a role and there's no general playbook. It still kind of feels that way in certain roles, but it's feeling like there's a lot of like really good people and playbooks that are starting to develop, and just leaning into those playbooks, whether they're on the partner acquisition front or the partner tech side or even the partner strategy side. There's really really good playbooks to lean into and really good kind of organization examples where to your point with HubSpot, Pete built the agency channel. Scott's now, building out this ecosystem function. Both are, really critical to HubSpot's success. I think 40%, 45% of HubSpot's revenue still comes from their agency channel today, and that's only going to accelerate within the ecosystem that Scott's building out as well. And so
Yeah.
it's really
Good
diving
point.
into some of those like those pre-built pathways now, or
Yeah.
general playbooks.
And that kind of circles back nicely to what we talked about, just signals of being in the golden era. Like it's only been in the past 2 years where there's been documented playbooks. Like think of all the good content creators in our space. Like there's playbooks. You're right. They're out there for you to kind of utilize to succeed. And so I think that's another indicator that we're really entering a golden era when stuff like that starts to come out.
Mhm.
But then, of course, having the swipe file and the tools is one thing. Putting them into action and navigating the org to succeed is another. And I think that's a really key skill set that a partnership person needs to have.
Couldn't agree more. I know we're wrapping up here in the last 3 minutes. Would love any additional kind of questions, thoughts about kind of the partnership space. I know it was a little bit of a fireside chat, but we thought we'd do it a little bit differently here, and just have a conversation about the space and what we're seeing, and some really cool trends, and especially given Ty's breadth and partnerships, and now going into Microsoft, and what we're seeing on the PartnerStack PRM side.